I never thought I would be the kind of person who sues their own family. I mean, we all have that one relative who is a little bit toxic or ungrateful, right? You usually just roll your eyes, complain to your friends, and move on with your life. But when someone looks you dead in the eye after you have given up 5 prime years of your life to raise their child and tells you that you are worthless, yeah, that changes things. It changes you from a supportive aunt into someone who pulls out a calculator and goes for the throat. My name is Harper, and I am currently sitting on a court judgment for $180,000 against my own niece, Raphaela. And the best part? She never saw it coming because she truly believed that family meant she could exploit me until I had nothing left to give. It all started, or rather it all ended, last Tuesday night. We were at this fancy Italian restaurant downtown, the kind where the pasta costs more than my weekly grocery budget. We were there to celebrate Raphaela. She had just landed a massive promotion at her marketing firm, moving up to a senior director role. I was genuinely happy for her. I really was. I raised my glass of sparkling water to toast her success, feeling a warm glow of pride in my chest. I thought we were a team. I thought my contribution to her life was the foundation that allowed her to build this career. I smiled at her and said, "I am so proud of you, Raph. You worked so hard for this. Now that you're going to be making the big bucks and have a more stable schedule, maybe we can finally talk about me transitioning back to my own life? I'd love to start applying for graphic design jobs again." I expected her to nod, maybe tear up a little, and thank me for putting my entire existence on hold since her son Leo was 3 months old. I expected acknowledgement. What I got instead was a laugh. And not a nice laugh. It was a cold, sharp barking sound that made the couple at the table next to us look over. Raphaela put her wine glass down and looked at me with this mix of pity and amusement that made my stomach turn. "Harper, don't be ridiculous," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You can't go back to work. Who would watch Leo? Besides, it's not like you have a career anymore. You've been out of the game for 5 years. Your portfolio is ancient history." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Excuse me," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I put my career on pause to help you. We agreed this was temporary until you got on your feet." "And I am on my feet," she snapped, her voice losing the fake sweetness. "But my new role requires more travel, not less. I need you more than ever. And honestly, Harper, stop acting like you're making some huge sacrifice. You just stay home and play with blocks all day. You're just a free babysitter. You have no real value in the professional world anymore, so you should be grateful I let you feel useful." Useful. She said it like I was a broken appliance she had graciously decided not to throw in the dumpster yet. Before I tell you what I did next, because trust me, it is satisfying, I want to know who I'm hanging out with today. Pause the video for just a second, scroll down, and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now and what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and honestly, I need to know there are sane people out there who understand why I was about to lose my absolute mind. Hey, are you back? Good. Because I was sitting there, gripping my fork so hard I thought the metal might actually bend. Just a free babysitter. The words echoed in my head. I thought about the sleepless nights when Leo had the flu and Raphaela was at a networking mixer. I thought about the potty training, the parent-teacher conferences she missed, the scraped knees I bandaged, and the thousands of hours I spent teaching her son to be a kind, functioning human being while she climbed the corporate ladder. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I realized in that split second that screaming gets you nothing but a scene. If she wanted to treat our arrangement like a transaction where I had zero value, then I was going to speak the only language she seemed to respect. Money. Cold, hard, calculated finance. I stood up, calmly placed my napkin on the table and looked her in the eye. "You're right, Raphaela. I have been acting like a free babysitter. That was my mistake. I should have been acting like a professional nanny. Enjoy your dinner. The bill for my services is in the mail." I walked out of that restaurant while she was still sputtering, probably thinking I was just being dramatic. She had no idea that I kept records. She had no idea that I am the type of person who writes everything down. Every single hour. When I got home, I didn't cry. I went straight to my laptop. I opened a spreadsheet that I had named Leo's Log, originally just intended to track his milestones and medical info for her. But over the years, it had become a time-stamped diary of my servitude. I filtered the dates. Start date, 5 years ago. End date, today. I looked up the average hourly rate for a high-end live-in nanny in our city. I factored in overtime, holiday pay, and overnight fees. The total came out to a staggering number. But it wasn't just a number to me. It was the price tag of my stolen youth. It was the quantifiable cost of her disrespect. I formatted it into a formal invoice, itemized by year with a net 30 payment term. I attached a cover letter stating that since my familial contribution was deemed to have no value, I was retroactively charging for professional services rendered as per her verbal contract of making it up to me when she made it big. The total at the bottom of the page read $180,000. I saved the PDF, printed it on thick high-quality paper, and also attached it to an email. My finger hovered over the enter key. I knew that once I pressed this there was no going back. This would nuke our relationship. It would tear the family apart. But then I heard her voice in my head again. You have no value. I hit send. And let me tell you, the fallout was nuclear. But before we get to the courtroom and the screaming voicemails, you need to understand how we got here. You need to understand how I let myself get trapped in this nightmare for 5 whole years. To understand why that specific insult, just a free babysitter, cut me so deep you have to rewind 5 years. Back then I wasn't the woman calculating interest on unpaid wages. I was 27, fresh off a major freelance contract, and I felt like my life was just starting. I had my own apartment, a growing client list for my graphic design business, and actual plans for the future. Raphaela, on the other hand, was 22, terrified and holding a positive pregnancy test. The father was out of the picture before the stick even dried. Raphaela was a wreck. She sat on my couch, hugging a throw pillow, sobbing about how her life was over, how she couldn't afford a baby, and how she was going to have to drop out of her marketing internship. I did what family does. I stepped up. I told her she wasn't alone. I told her I'd help. But help is a slippery word, isn't it? It's vague. It changes shape depending on who is asking and who is giving. When Leo was born, the agreement was simple. I would move into her cramped 2-bedroom rental temporarily. Just for 3 months, maybe 6. Just until the baby was sleeping through the night and Raphaela secured a full-time position. I gave up my apartment. I put my furniture in storage fees I paid for, by the way, and set up a makeshift office in the corner of her living room. I thought I could juggle both. Design logos during nap times and be the supportive aunt in between. I was delusional. The first 6 months were a blur of colic, diapers, and exhaustion that settled into my bones like a heavy fog. Raphaela went back to work when Leo was 6 weeks old. She had to, she said. She needed to prove herself. So I was the one up at 2 a.m. rocking a screaming infant. I was the one blending sweet potatoes. I was the one tracking his fevers and learning how to swaddle him like a burrito so he'd actually sleep for 45 minutes. Slowly, the temporary arrangement began to stretch. 3 months turned into 6. 6 turned into a year. Every time I brought up moving out or taking on a new design project, Raphaela would spiral. I just need a little more time, Harper, she'd plead, giving me those big teary eyes. I'm finally getting traction at work. If I have to pay for daycare right now, I'll be broke. Just give me until I get a raise. I promise once I make it big, I'll make it up to you. We're in this together. We're in this together. That phrase became the shackles that bound me to her house. I started turning down clients. First, it was just the rush jobs because I didn't have the bandwidth. Then I stopped bidding on projects altogether. My laptop, once my portal to a career I loved, started gathering dust under a stack of Dr. Seuss books. I watched my professional network fade away while Raphaela's exploded. And here is the thing about being the primary caregiver that nobody warns you about. You fall in love with the kid. Leo wasn't just my niece's son anymore. He was my boy. I was the one who saw his first steps while Raphaela was at a mandatory happy hour. I heard his first words. In fact, and this still stings to admit, his first word wasn't mama directed at Raphaela. He looked right at me one afternoon while I was feeding him applesauce and said it. When I told Raphaela, she laughed it off, but I saw a flicker of annoyance. Instead of stepping up, though, she stepped back. It became a routine. She would leave at 7 a.m. and come home at 8 p.m., sometimes later. She'd breeze in, smelling like expensive perfume and white wine, looking sharp in her blazer, while I was wearing sweatpants covered in spit-up and unidentifiable sticky substances. She'd play with Leo for 20 minutes, take a cute selfie for Instagram with the caption, Mom Life #grind, and then hand him back to me because he was crying or needed a diaper change. You're so good with him, she'd say, kicking off her heels. I don't know what I'd do without you, Harper. You're saving my life. She was feeding my ego with praise while starving my bank account. I was burning through my savings to buy groceries because she forgot to transfer money for the third time that week. I was the one buying Leo's clothes because she was too busy to go to the store. I convinced myself it was okay because I was investing in our family. I was investing in her future so that eventually she could support us all or at least pay me back so I could restart my life. I remember one specific afternoon when Leo was 3. I got an email from an old contact offering me a massive branding project. It was the kind of job that could resurrect my dead career. I was shaking with excitement. When Raphaela came home, I told her I needed to take it, which meant we had to look at daycare options for part of the day. She didn't congratulate me. She sighed. A heavy, burdened sigh. Harper, really? Right now? I'm up for a performance review next month. If I have to deal with daycare drop-offs and pickups, I'll lose my edge. Can't you just wait a little longer? You've already waited this long. What's another few months? I looked at Leo playing with his trucks on the rug and I caved. I emailed the contact and declined the job. I chose her career over mine. I didn't realize it then, but I wasn't being a supportive sister figure. I was being a doormat. I was enabling her to live the life of a single child-free bachelor while I played the role of the traditional 1950s housewife, minus the husband and the security. I was building her castle brick by brick using pieces of my own foundation. And that brings us back to that restaurant table. 5 years of this. 5 years of just a little longer. 5 years of me being the invisible engine keeping her life running. She knew exactly what I had sacrificed. She knew every job I turned down. So when she looked at me and said I had no value, it wasn't just an insult. It was a revisionist history. She was rewriting the last 5 years to erase my sacrifice so she wouldn't have to feel guilty about leaving me behind. But she forgot one crucial thing. While I was just staying home playing with blocks, I was also the one managing the household budget. I was the one organizing the files. And I was the one who kept a log of everything. The morning after I sent the invoice, the silence was deafening. I expected my phone to blow up immediately, but for hours there was nothing. No angry texts, no frantic calls. Just a heavy, eerie quiet that hung over the house. I was already packed. I had spent the night shoving my clothes, my laptop, and the few personal items I had left into boxes. I knew I couldn't stay under her roof after declaring war, but part of me, the stupid, hopeful part, wondered if maybe, just maybe, the invoice had been a wake-up call. Maybe she was reading it right now, seeing the dollar signs and realizing the magnitude of what I'd done for her. I was wrong. At 11:30 a.m., the front door slammed open. Raphaela stormed in, not in her usual power suit, but in frantic disarray. She wasn't at work. She had come home specifically to deal with me. She marched into the living room where I was taping up a box of books. She was holding her phone in one hand and a crumpled piece of paper, my invoice, in the other. Her face was a shade of red I had never seen before. "Is this a joke?" she screamed, shaking the paper at me. $180,000? Are you insane, Harper? Are you actually out of your mind? I stood up, keeping my distance. "It's not a joke, Raphaela. You said I had no value. You said I was just a free babysitter. So I calculated the value of a professional babysitter. It turns out my value is quite high." "We are family," she yelled, throwing the paper onto the coffee table. "You don't charge family for helping out. You lived here rent-free. I fed you. I gave you a roof over your head. I lived here to raise your son," I countered, my voice shaking but getting stronger. "And rent-free? Raph, I paid for half the groceries. I paid the utility bills 3 times last year when you forgot. I bought Leo's clothes. And do you know how much a live-in nanny costs in this city? Rent is usually included as part of the compensation package. You didn't do me a favor. I did you a favor worth nearly 200 grand. She laughed again, that same cruel, dismissive bark from the restaurant. "You are so delusional. You think you can just invoice me for being a decent aunt? You think any court in the world is going to take this seriously? You're just bitter because I'm successful and you're a failed designer with nothing going for her." That hit a nerve. I am a failed designer because I quit my job to save yours. I shouted back. I turned down the branding project. I turned down the agency offer. I gave it all up for you. "Nobody asked you to," she shrieked. "You volunteered. You could have left at any time. But you stayed because you had nowhere else to go. You're a leech, Harper. A burden. Honestly, I've been waiting for you to leave so I could hire a real professional who actually knows what they're doing, instead of some spinster aunt who thinks she's a martyr. The air left the room. A spinster aunt. A leech. This was the woman whose vomit I had cleaned up when she had food poisoning. This was the woman whose child I had taught to read. She wasn't just ungrateful. She was rewriting reality to make herself the victim and me the villain. She had to believe I was useless so she could justify using me. If I'm such a burden, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper, then you won't mind if I leave right now. Leo gets picked up from preschool at 3 p.m. Good luck. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, panic flashing behind the anger. You can't just leave. I have a meeting with the board at 2 o'clock. I can't pick him up. Not my problem, I said, picking up my box. I'm just the free babysitter, remember? I have no value. Surely a real professional can handle it. You can't do this to me, she yelled, following me to the door. If you walk out that door, don't you dare think you're ever seeing Leo again. I will cut you out of his life so fast your head will spin. You will never see him grow up. Is that what you want? She played her ace. She knew Leo was my weak spot. She knew I loved that boy more than anything. She was holding him hostage to keep me in line. It was the ultimate betrayal. She was weaponizing my love for her son to secure my continued servitude. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. Tears stung my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of pure molten rage. I looked back at her, standing there in her expensive shoes, using her own child as a bargaining chip. You know what, Raphaela? I said, looking her dead in the eye. You just made this so much easier for me. You think you can threaten me with Leo? You're about to find out exactly what happens when you push a burden too far. Watch your mailbox. My lawyer will be in touch. I walked out. I got into my beat-up sedan, the one I hadn't serviced in 2 years because I was saving money for Leo's swim lessons, and I drove away. My phone started vibrating instantly. Text after text. Calls. Voicemails. I didn't look at them. I drove straight to the only place I knew to go. A small legal clinic downtown where an old college friend, Sarah, worked. I walked in, dropped the Leo's log binder on her desk. A 3-inch thick binder containing printed spreadsheets, text message screenshots, receipts, and a daily journal of hours worked, and said, "Tell me I have a case." Sarah opened the binder. She saw the log of 14-hour days. She saw the text from Raphaela saying things like, "I know I'm late again, just handle it, I'll pay you back later. And you're a lifesaver, I owe you everything." She saw the breakdown of market rates. She looked up at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Harper," she said, tapping the binder. "This isn't just a case. This is a receipt. And in this state, verbal contracts regarding domestic labor are enforceable if there's evidence of reliance and promise of compensation. You have 5 years of evidence." The war was on. Raphaela thought she could bully me into submission. She thought I was weak. But she forgot that I was the one who raised her son. I was the one who had the discipline to wake up every 2 hours for a year. I had stamina. And now I had a lawyer. I drove away from that house, my heart hammering a chaotic rhythm against my ribs. But the strange thing was, the fear was overshadowed by this intoxicating wave of pure vindication. Raphaela had 5 hours until Leo's preschool closed. 5 hours to figure out how to be a mother and a senior corporate director simultaneously. A feat I had accomplished daily for 5 years, but without the title, the salary, or the respect. The minute I walked into Sarah's office, the first thing I did was turn off my phone. I didn't want to hear the begging or the threats. I needed quiet to process the trauma of the last 5 years and channel that rage into meticulous organization. And believe me, Raphael was panicking. When I finally checked my voicemails hours later, the descent was steep. The first one was just pure, unadulterated fury. "You absolute psychopath. If I miss this board meeting, I swear I will ruin you. You are a terrible aunt and you will never see Leo again." The next one, 2 hours later, was desperate. She was whispering, her voice cracking. "Harper, please, I can't find anyone. Daycare won't take him without 2 days' notice. Can you just come back for this afternoon? I'll give you $100. I promise I'll be better." $100 for 5 years of my life. I deleted it without a second thought. The final messages were utter chaos. She'd missed the meeting, scrambling to find a neighbor to cover the pickup, and now she was weeping. The corporate mask had completely dissolved. She was realizing with brutal clarity that her entire carefully constructed life was built on my willingness to be exploited, and the foundation had just been yanked out from under her. It was exactly what she deserved. Meanwhile, Sarah and I were focused entirely on the numbers. Leo's log wasn't just a daily sign-in sheet. It was an artifact of servitude. It included not only the basic hours, which consistently clocked in at 50 to 70 hours a week, but also detailed notes. April 12, 2021. Raphaela canceled dinner to stay late at work. Coverage extended until 10 p.m. Overtime applied. August 5, 2022. Attended Leo's doctor appointment alone. Raphaela texting from office during appointment. We cross-referenced everything with Raphaela's own text messages, where she frequently acknowledged my work and often wrote things like, "I owe you everything," or, "Don't worry, I'm going to pay you back double for this later." Sarah pointed out that these messages solidified the promise of compensation, a key element in proving an implied contract. We were using Raphaela's own words against her, transforming her casual entitlement into binding legal evidence. We settled on the $180,000 figure based on the average market rate for a professional full-time nanny with live-in duties in our metropolitan area, factoring in the sheer volume of overtime I had accrued. It wasn't arbitrary. It was the actual professional cost of her free ride. 2 days after I walked out, Sarah sent the formal demand letter, complete with the detailed 5-year itemized invoice. Raphaela's reaction was explosive. She didn't call me, she called my mom, my sister, and every relative she could reach, claiming I was shaking her down, that I was trying to steal her life savings, and that I was jealous of her promotion. My family, bless them, had always been hands-off about our arrangement. They assumed I was just helping out. But the moment they saw the $180,000 number, they started calling me. "Harper, honey, are you sure about this?" "It's family," my mother pleaded. She called me a leech and said I had no value, I told my mother calmly. "I am just proving her wrong. If my labor has value in the marketplace, it has value to her." I had never felt so clear-headed. Every hour I spent meticulously arranging the evidence felt like a quiet act of self-reclamation. This wasn't just about the money. It was about getting Raphaela to acknowledge that my life, my time, and my love were not free resources for her consumption. Raphaela finally got a lawyer, a young, cocky defense attorney who sent a reply demanding we drop the suit immediately, claiming the domestic relationship precludes a professional contract, and threatened to countersue for emotional distress and slander. We laughed. Emotional distress? After the free babysitter comment? The audacity was stunning. Sarah didn't even bother arguing back. She just formally filed the civil suit, using the logbook as the core of the complaint. The notice of litigation went out and the waiting game began. We requested a summary judgment, arguing that Raphaela's own communications proved the existence of an implied contract for eventual compensation, which she then violated by dismissing my services as valueless. The judge agreed to set a hearing date. I spent the next few weeks trying to put my graphic design career back together, focusing on new clients, but every time I sat down at my laptop, I felt a piece of Leo was missing. The silence in my new temporary apartment was jarring after 5 years of constant toddler chatter. I realized that even though I was doing this for my future, I had lost the most precious part of those 5 years. The daily presence of the boy I considered my son. That quiet pain solidified my resolve. I had sacrificed my career for her child and now she was going to pay the cost. The courtroom showdown was set and I knew Raphaela was coming in hot, convinced she was the victim. The day of the hearing felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a theatrical confrontation. I walked into the courthouse with Sarah, carrying the infamous 3-inch thick logbook like a shield. Raphaela was already there, flanked by her smarmy, inexperienced lawyer. She was wearing a crisp suit, her face pale, and she refused to look at me. The air was thick with tension, heavy with 5 years of unspoken resentment. Raphaela's attorney, let's call him Smirk, started his argument by focusing entirely on the emotional angle. He painted Raphaela as a dedicated single mother and me as a greedy, opportunistic aunt who had suddenly turned hostile after my niece achieved professional success. He hammered on the gift of services defense, claiming family duty and emotional connection, not monetary exchange, was the basis of our arrangement. Then it was Sarah's turn. She didn't lead with emotion. She led with finance. She placed the logbook onto the podium, a sound that echoed loudly in the quiet room, and spent 20 minutes dissecting the daily workload. She didn't use the word aunt. She used domestic labor provider. She didn't say watching Leo. She said managing the full-time care, education, and health of a minor child. She presented the evidence that solidified the case. The specific text messages from Raphaela promising to make it up to me and pay me back, proving she acknowledged the debt. She showed the judge the evidence of Raphaela's repeated failure to contribute to household costs, showing my reliance on the future promised compensation. Then Sarah read verbatim the specific line that started the whole disaster. "You're just a free babysitter. You have no value, so you should be grateful I let you feel useful." The judge, a formidable woman who had been stoic throughout the proceedings, finally leaned forward. "Ms. Raphaela," she asked, "is this quote accurate? Did you say that to your aunt, Ms. Harper, regarding her 5 years of service?" Raphaela stammered, looking at the floor. "Your Honor, I was stressed. It was in the heat of an argument. I didn't mean it literally. But you communicated to Ms. Harper that her services were valueless, correct? After 5 years of Ms. Harper foregoing her career to ensure your success," the judge pressed. Raphaela murmured a reluctant, "Yes." The judge looked at Smirk. "Counselor, the plaintiff has provided 5 years of documented services, text message evidence showing promise of compensation, and testimony that the defendant explicitly defined these services as a transaction, albeit a free one, before refusing payment and claiming the provider had no value. In this court's view, the defendant's statements extinguished any claim of gift of services and definitively established the intent of a quid pro quo relationship, where Ms. Raphaela reneged on her promise. The ruling came down fast. The judge granted the summary judgment in full. Raphaela was liable for the entire amount, $180,000. She was ordered to liquidate assets if necessary, but she had to pay. I looked over at Raphaela. Her face wasn't red with anger. It was white with shock. Her smug lawyer was stammering about an appeal, but the damage was done. Her promotion, her new corporate life, all of it was now shackled to a massive debt, proving that my labor did indeed have value. But the real twist? It wasn't about the money for me. It was about Leo. When the verdict came down, I knew what I had to do. I didn't want the money to destroy Raphaela's life entirely, because ultimately destroying her life would hurt Leo. So after the hearing, I approached Raphaela, who was still slumped in her chair, weeping, her corporate life shattered. "Raphaela," I said quietly. She flinched, refusing to look up. "The money is not for me." She finally looked up, confusion mixing with despair. "What are you talking about?" "I am dropping the lawsuit and the judgment on one condition," I said. "You will not pay me $180,000. You will, however, put the full amount into a legally binding, irrevocable educational and healthcare trust fund for Leo. You will make me the co-trustee, ensuring the money is used only for his benefit, and you will agree to a mediated visitation schedule where I get to see him regularly." He stared at me dumbfounded. $180,000. For Leo. "It's the price of his childhood," I explained. "The money represents the future I sacrificed, and now it will be his future. This is the only way I ensure that your selfish choices don't completely destroy his life too. Take the deal or I garnish your corporate wages for the next 20 years. She signed the papers the next day. The $180,000 didn't go into my bank account. It went into Leo's trust. Raphaela learned the hard way that when you call family valueless, you might end up paying the full market rate to replace them. She lost her power, her ego, and most of her standing in the family. She was forced to hire a professional, salaried nanny who she now had to treat with respect, because she understood the cost of labor. I didn't get my 5 years back, but I got my life back, I got my vindication, and most importantly, I got to be the happy, loving aunt to Leo, seeing him regularly without the burden of being his exploited primary caregiver. I made sure that Raphaela's debt to me became a gift to her son. That, my friends, is the most satisfying kind of revenge. If you enjoyed Harper's story of turning betrayal into a $180,000 gift, please drop a comment and tell me what you would have done in the courtroom. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales of sweet, satisfying justice.